Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. As usual, we have our regular contributor, the one and only Zakir Hussain, and welcome to everyone who's watching. Today we'll be discussing about health in general, especially the UK. And I just want to say that from the stats, what I find is that a lot of people aren't actually subscribing. So please do subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. Like the video and share with friends and family. It goes a long way for me. I get the motivation to actually carry on. So without further ado, Zakir bhai, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Rahul bhai. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. So how was Ramadan for you?
It was busy, went very quickly. Yes, Ramadan, Taraweeh prayer, just managing family, managing work. So it's added responsibility. But alhamdulillah, it was a very good month.
Hmm.
Just sad that it's gone so quickly. It seemed to me as if people were sending Ramadan Mubarak messages, and a few days later, it was Eid Mubarak messages. That's how quickly it went, I felt. What about
Mashallah.
yourself?
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, I had a very good Ramadan. I can't complain, last few years, it's been really good for me. I've been very disciplined. I've tried my best to have a good Ramadan, and I've kept all the 30 without any hiccups. Alhamdulillah, no,
Alhamdulillah.
no complaints there. So generally, do you think that during Ramadan, Muslims, you know, uh, you know, uh, eat healthy? Do you think they, care about their health, or do they just let go? What's your view?
To be brutally honest and frank, from experience, from knowledge, from speaking to others, and even from research, we don't eat very healthy, unfortunately. Most of us, if you look at what we break our iftar with, a lot of the items are fried.
Mhm.
Now, if we have been fasting the whole day, gas builds up as a result of not being able to eat much. And then in that, you're putting fried food. So it's not a good combination. I think we just need to be, as a community, the Bangladeshi community and probably the South Asian community, we just have to be mindful of these things where certain foods, if we eat, or even eating citrus fruits, but some people think it's healthy to eat pineapple on an empty stomach. When they're breaking their fast, they think, it's fruit, it can't do you any harm. You have to be very, very
Yeah,
mindful
yeah.
because you're adding acid onto what is already very acidic within your system. So I think also basic knowledge, I think, about the human body, especially as Muslims, we're fasting. What should we have suhoor with? What should we be breaking our fast with? These are very important things because if your health is not good, and you haven't eaten healthy, you will see when people go to the Taraweeh prayers, you hear all sorts of noises coming from all
Yeah,
sorts of directions.
exactly.
It's a result of what we have eaten.
Yeah.
So I think as Muslims, we're meant to be always considerate of other people and the community. And it becomes evident that we haven't eaten the best iftar, particularly when we go to the Taraweeh prayers. So yes, definitely, I think we have quite a lot of work to do when it comes to health and understanding of how best to preserve ourselves. Remember, also, it is not just about you and me just eating well ourselves. If we don't eat well ourselves and we fall ill, it impacts on our families as well.
Mm.
You see,
Without a doubt.
also if our health is not good, um, also the children that we have, for
Mm.
those who are still of that age, the children you have, you're passing on genes. And I'm no science expert, but from what I've learned from school, you'll be passing on the genes that you have. So if you're not in good shape and you're not looking after yourself, you've got a lot of health problems, you're
Mm.
likely to subject your children
Yeah.
to those same problems that you have. So what have your children done wrong to your children to come done
Mm.
wrong for you to do that to them? But we don't think in that space. Unfortunately, we just say, as, oh well, I haven't really looked after myself. I'm just affecting myself. You are not affecting yourself. You're affecting the health system. You're affecting those around you. It's a big thing, actually, health. But
Yeah.
I'll leave it there. I'm sure you've got questions, so I'll leave it there for now as an
Yeah.
introductory
I mean, you
question.
would think like obviously through time, people would actually change their diets, but obviously we're seeing more more items are actually added to our plates,
Yes,
as the years go
I
by. It's like
um,
nowadays, the hot wings, fried chicken, there's
yes,
another
yes,
addition. Obviously, we have the traditional food like pakoras, the samosas, and whatnot, kebabs, um, and then like roast chicken, pulao, or akhni,
yes,
we call it in Bengali.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
all oily, isn't it? I mean, oily food.
It's oil, and you know what makes it worse? What do we have as desserts? Mishti.
Yeah,
So you got the two worst things that you can have, and
exactly.
all on an empty stomach. So we
Exactly.
are compounding our problem. You
Yeah,
know,
so I think this is it. This is, we're actually doing a disservice to ourselves. Ramadan is supposed to be one of those special times where we rejuvenate
cleanse
our
our body and mind.
health. Exactly, yeah. But unfortunately, but anyway, Ramadan does have its benefits. With the
Absolutely. I
fast.
mean,
So
I think
if only if we could just cut down on the food, like
absolutely.
instead of the fried food, go for the
Yeah.
healthy options. Yeah.
And
So maybe this is
if you
something
look at
as
the
Muslim we should really look into.
yeah, I think if we look at the kisuri that we have,
Mm,
I don't know the equivalent to say in English. You want
mm,
to call it porridge or
yeah,
whatever you want to
yeah,
call it.
yeah.
That's
Porridge
not
would
bad.
be, I think, yeah, porridge would.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to call it salty porridge,
Mm,
it's not bad for you. It's good. It's something to eat and stuff.
mm,
But the amount of salt content and the amount of ghee that you put on there or oil,
yeah,
if that's regulated,
yeah,
that is not a bad dish to have as a starter.
exactly.
It's not because it helps the system. It's a soft food. It helps the system. But what do? We put fried onions on it. We put extra ghee on it, and we just it's important because we through health problems. We'll come to that in a bit. How the health problems can have so much impact on your income, on your ability to have children, many other things. But I'll leave that for a bit later in the sort of talk today.
So, so generally, Zakir bhai, like in the UK has always been a very special place for like foreigners to come and treat themselves, and especially when it comes to like health tourism, UK is seen as a one of those very special places where people who are wealthy, they tend to come to the UK for treatments. But when it comes to general health and the general population, especially with the NHS. Since last few decades, we've seen so much underfunding in the NHS. As a result, uh, people are losing faith in the whole system. Like nowadays, like if you go to any hospital in the UK, on average, you have to wait at least 6 to 7 hours just to be seen by a
Yeah.
doctor. You know,
It's
you can't get a GP appointment nowadays. I don't know if you're actually aware of that. Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
like no, so what happens is normally like you do actually call up your GP. Plus, if they answer, with my
Yes,
GP, they don't normally answer, and you have to actually call to see a GP. You have to call most of the GPs before 10 o'clock in the morning.
8 in the morning,
Right?
the one you start
Yeah,
calling.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
eight.
And most of the time, GPs are so busy because everybody's calling at the same time they can't answer. So what
Yeah.
I tend to do if I need to see a doctor or if my family needs to see a doctor, I have to actually go there physically.
Wow.
So after going there, so basically what the receptionist does, like they'll take your details and they'll say like the doctor will call you either today or before for the following day.
Yeah,
Sometimes they call, sometimes they don't. And even when they call, they'll just interview you. And if they find that it's really serious, they'll call you in, or else
yeah,
just leave it at that, you see. They say,
yeah,
they'll just say if it's an urgent matter, just go to the hospital. So this is the state of the GP. I do feel for the GPs and the doctors in the country because at the same time, they are actually underfunded when it comes to pay. I'm sure you've realized or seen
yes,
in the
absolutely.
media, they've been striking. So right now, they've actually gone on strike, especially the junior doctors. For the next 6 months, they'll be striking regularly because of pay.
It,
The
yeah,
pay hasn't been going up, for a number of years. Yeah. So they're asking for, I think, something like 15% pay rise,
Yeah,
just to be
I think
in line with inflation.
yeah,
Like it's a tragedy, isn't it? Like we live in the fifth
absolutely.
richest country in the world. A junior doctor, after qualifying after like 8 years of studying, they get like, I think they start on something like 29,000 pounds a year,
Wow,
which is a
that
job,
is
isn't it?
yeah.
Where
I
is the
mean,
incentive? Like in many countries around the world, even in the US, even in places like India, Bangladesh, doctors do really well when it comes to income because, in
yeah,
those countries, like they can actually, beside your main job, like working in a government hospital, these countries then allow doctors to actually work privately. Whereas in the
yeah,
UK, I don't think the doctors can actually work privately because they have to do long hours, and plus, it's shift work, isn't it? Most doctors who work in hospitals, they have to work shift
absolutely. They're
work.
overworked. I
Um,
mean,
so
they
that's
are
one
overworked.
issue. And the other issue is like, uh, uh, we don't have enough doctors and nurses in this country. Like the NHS heavily relies on foreign workers.
Yes, I
But
think
this is something the government really needs to tackle and look into, because I know a good number of people from my community who wanted to actually study medicine, but they couldn't get it because there's so much
yeah,
competition. Not just in this country, but people also come from abroad to study in this country because of the legacy. You know,
yes,
Apparently, we all know like a UK graduate or UK degree goes a long way. It's
absolutely,
highly
yeah.
valued around the world. So that's I don't know why. I think it's just the will. The will isn't there. Like the government has a lot of money. We can spend
I
trillions
think
of dollars
I
when it
think
comes to like going to wars with other countries. But when it comes to like investing in the
yeah.
NHS,
I was going to say,
community
Mumbai,
houses, investing in education, we don't
yeah,
have the billion.
yeah. I
That's
mean,
the
the
irony
cynic,
of
this,
and so that's one of the reasons. And then when especially when it comes to youngsters, Zakir Bhai, when they see like all the public services going from bad to worse, they lose hope in politics. That is
yeah,
why
absolutely.
politics is broken in this country. That's why you don't
I
see
think
young generation engaging in politics. They don't want to vote.
I,
You know,
you mentioned
when
quite a
you
few
go
things.
to on
Yeah,
average political meeting, you'll see the elders, but you hardly see any young people there. You know.
I think you've touched on quite a lot of points. So the cynic in me says that a lot of these things are by design. So, for example, if you don't pay the juniors doctors that well, just look at the double standards. Or I don't want to use the H word and say um, but the double standard. We were clapping for those nurses and doctors only a few years ago,
Yeah.
and now they're going on strike. So, did we really appreciate them? So, clapping is easy. You see, so the doctors, I feel sorry for them. I went with my daughter just a few days ago.
Yeah.
We waited for 3 hours, couldn't see a doctor. I said, look, I'm going because my daughter had an allergic reaction.
Yeah.
3 hours we waited, and they said, oh, we still can't guarantee
Oh.
whether you'll see somebody or not. So I just had to come back with my daughter. So 3 hours wasted. That's one. You mentioned about the doctor's appointment. Absolutely. If you call 2 minutes past 8 o'clock, they say, oh, all these slots have been taken up. I
Hmm.
mean, surely you can't have a 2 minute window.
Yeah.
So things are really quite bad. And the reason why I say it's by design, if you think about it, if people are not going into the doctor profession because it doesn't pay well, it gives people who have a lot of money to outsource, as in have companies where they bring in doctors from abroad.
Hmm.
Like the PPE contract, same thing.
Hmm.
You create a demand, you stifle the population, so they don't want to apply for it because they don't make much money.
Hmm.
But someone from abroad coming here, even if they get half of your money, they're
Hmm.
still making good money. But who makes the big the other half chunk? The
Uh,
person who's and
yeah.
most likely they're
The
friends of the
middleman. Yeah.
politician.
Yeah.
So this type of criminality, I'll have to say, I'm sorry to use such strong words, because people are doing it on pen and paper. It's all above board. Everyone knows. Look what happened with the PPE.
Hmm.
We know that these types of scandals, people died and people made money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And who made money? Friends of the government. Same thing happening with the doctors. I really do feel sorry for the doctors. We were clapping for them, and now look what situation they're in. Okay, so I think we were very disingenuous as a government.
Yeah.
And the people, unfortunately, followed suit and just clapped, and they thought that they were appreciated. The real appreciation is when you look after them financially, making sure they have good working conditions. None of that's available. So these doctors are running, seeing patients. They are doing the best that they can. We cannot fault them. Naturally, because they're on the front line, we go. I mean, I was quite annoyed that my daughter wasn't seen, but I wasn't annoyed at the doctors. I was annoyed at the government, because this is what they have brought us to. If you have money, we are so busy now saying, oh, we need to defend this country. That country in the Middle East, what does it have to do with us here? We've got people sleeping, rough sleeping.
Yeah.
All ethnicities, white, black, Asian, whatever, all the different nationalities, they are suffering. Children are not able to all eat their 2 meals. The many, again, it's across the board, different ethnicities. You have white people, black people. So you have a lot of suffering within the UK, but yet a tiny country in the Middle East is so important that we give our resources over there. But yet we are paying taxes so that those taxes can go to another country for them to then, behave inappropriately towards another population. So this is, I think, quite serious. And as a population, we need to really get more stuck into politics, understand politics as well. And as the saying goes, sometimes you just have to follow the money to find out, what is actually happening. Just follow the money. Who benefits from all of these things? So I don't want to go too political here, but I think coming back to the health issue, it's unfortunate that we can't spend on our doctors and our people are suffering. Yet, quite willingly, the politicians, all they want to talk about is how they want to supply arms to another country. It's really baffling. And I think those of us who are thinking, who have a conscience, who have morals and ethics, we have to be a lot louder. For the sake of, it's not just for the sake of, the people suffering in the Middle East, but for the people at home here, across the board, across nationalities, across ethnicity. We are all suffering. We're all in the same boat, all of us. And we need to take a grip, and we need to really understand politics and be involved in order to make that change.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time where we all used to be part of the NHS and generally the health system in the UK. People from abroad used to come in droves to have treatment here. But you'd be surprised by, our health system in the UK has gone down so much. It's even below like UAE, Canada. That is right now. Take a guess, like in terms of ranking, where we are right now.
I don't think they're in the top. I don't think they're in the top 10. I would say possibly.
So we're in
the top 30?
Yeah. So basically, we're like 34th.
Wow. So
worldwide stats, so that it's very what's the word? I mean, I'm shocking.
For a trillion, so for a $1 trillion economy, for $1 trillion economy with roughly 70 million people as a population, you should not be having any of these problems.
Exactly. And guess which country is the number one in terms of ranking for healthcare?
I would say one of the Middle Eastern countries, probably.
Well, not quite. It's actually Singapore.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, Singapore.
That it doesn't surprise me. I would have said Singapore's in the top 5. I would definitely say Singapore is top 5. But
that's is number 1, by the way. Then it's Canada. Then it's Finland. Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of the Nordic countries, they're doing so well. Honestly, I've spoken to a few people who live in Nordic countries like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, and they have their countries are like social welfare countries, and they're like in terms of management, they manage it so well, Zakir bhai, honestly.
Absolutely.
Why can we not learn from these countries? I mean, I think the priorities here are wrong. Like in the UK, we tend to prioritize like foreign affairs more than domestic affairs.
I think we have, unfortunately, politicians who are not acting in the best interest of our country. Number one. Number two, unfortunately, there is this British arrogance whereby we think we're at the top and we're above learning. For example, Sweden, they did not employ all these restrictions when it came to COVID.
Yeah.
Yet the amount of deaths that they had, compared to the countries who took measures, they were relatively lower. Yet no politician, no one of real worth that I can see in the media is actually saying, hang on, we had COVID, many people died. What lessons did we learn? So these measures that were taken weren't actually that effective. So if we were to have another COVID or something similar, do we employ the same restrictions, or do we do what Sweden did? Again, no case study. Why? Money needs to be made. I'm sorry to be so blunt on this podcast, but I think sometimes we have to mention the elephant in the room. All that has happened during COVID is certain corners of this country and certain people of higher rank made a lot of money. So if we were to just use our logic and say people died, usually it's people who are not that wealthy and, unfortunately, not at the higher end of the socioeconomic ladder. And people at the higher end of the socioeconomic ladder made a lot of money. Let's just do basic maths.
Exactly. I mean, take it as like as to how many people are actually on the waiting list for operations in the UK?
In their thousands. In their thousands. Tens of thousands.
No, it's actually 8 million people.
Oh my, that is surprising. That is 8 million.
And, out of the 8 million, like 390,000, we'll have to wait more than a year just to be seen.
Wow, that I am so. So your stats. Where did you get that from? I'm very surprised.
But it's from a website called health.org.uk.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I will actually. That is very surprising. So now, for example, if you or me were to have some sort of problem and we needed to have an operation, we'll become go into the 9 million. As in we will be after those. This is actually quite staggering. So again, questions need to be asked and people need to be very informed before when the voting comes. We don't want to make this too much into a political thing, but I do think 8 million that is totally scandalous and unacceptable, really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't want to make it political, but at the same time, sometimes the government takes the blame. Yeah. So right now we have the Tories. We know, like the NHS was the product of Labour Party in the UK. They're the ones who actually created the NHS. So when you have the Tories in power and managing the NHS, I don't think naturally they'll be too keen to actually save the NHS.
Yeah, I think
I think and the way
with the Tory government.
With
the Tory government, remember, again, if we go back in history and we look at before you had the peasants and you had the nobles, that's all you had. So those at the top, they do not want to have a class of people where they are okay. They need issues in a society in order to gain control. So what it is, they wouldn't want to help your average person because it's not in their interest. If you have a society where people are well off, they have time to think about, okay, the questions that when they're fighting for bread and water, they don't have time to think about how things like politics or how the system works because they just every day trying to make ends meet. If you have a population, a thinking population, that's dangerous for the government. And again, I don't want to go too much into that line, but you know where I'm going with this. So a lot of things are by design. Exactly. This is for me. I don't want to be influencing people. I don't want to be doing the thinking for people. What I would say to people is, please ask yourself this question. As you mentioned before, a country which has 3 trillion, not 1, not 2, 3 trillion, and not a huge population compared to others. Why should we be struggling? Why? I mean, a child of 10 years old, if you were to say, hang on, I've got £50,000 and I've got 2 people struggling, how do you think I should divide it? I think the child would say, why don't you give 25 to that one and 25 to that one? But it seems our government can't do that maths. Exactly. It's by design. It's unfortunate, but the Tory government have never, ever wanted any equality. It's unfortunate, really, that they still get voted in so often. And I do think our Labour strategy maybe hasn't been up to the mark because, with all the austerity they've done, all the cutting they've done, they still managed to get into power. So, a lot of questions need to be asked.
Let's look at the diseases that people suffer most in the country.
Yeah.
Can you take a guess which is the number one disease we have in the UK?
I would say probably heart, something to do with
Yeah, so number
heart
one
disease.
in the UK is heart disease. Number
Wow.
two is cancer. Number three is stroke. Number three is lung disease. And number four is liver disease.
Wow. And I
So
was actually doing a bit of
why do
research
you think we heart disease is number one?
because I, you know, because this podcast is being watched by many people, and probably children will probably be watching as well. So I need to be very careful with my language. But we are eating really, really bad stuff. Just to make it very
Without a
easy for
doubt,
people,
without a doubt. I
we
think
are eating manufactured, processed food.
processed food.
Now, what I would say is for someone to challenge themselves, go and eat processed food. I mean, knowingly go and eat processed food for 2 days, and you would see you would not need to go to the toilet to relieve yourself. You wouldn't, as in for your bowels to open for number two. You wouldn't need to. Do you know why? That food is in. There's nothing to digest it. It's cardboard food. I'm not saying that that's the best way, but I have tried it myself. I'm speaking from experience. I have had a situation where for 36 hours I just ate basically junk food, and I could not get myself to go to the toilet and relieve myself. I couldn't. But then I had to have prunes and other things like fruits, and then all of a sudden I can go and relieve myself. So basically, these sort of foods are really bad for us, and this is the reason why our heart, a lot of it has saturated fat and many other things. I mean, all the processed stuff, it has a lot of salt and it has a lot of fat. So we need to look at the actual packaging and make sure that it has low fat, many other things. I think we just need to start going back to, again, we are eating genetically modified food. You do know all the food we eat, unless it says organic, you do know it's genetically modified.
I know.
Now, the default position is genetically modified food, but how many people are actually really aware of it?
Exactly.
Or seriously give it a thought? That's why we're having these problems.
Like out of all the countries in Europe, like UK has the worst like eating habits, according to like different.
I'm not surprised. And all these fast food, McDonald's and Burger King and all these places that people go to eat.
Chips, and whatnot. When it
And,
comes to Asians, obviously Asian people, we use a lot of oil in our cooking, that's not very helpful.
And we don't diversify. So what I was going to say, Ruhul Bhai, we're talking about health, and I wanted to really bring it home to, our immediate community. So when I was doing a bit of research, so this is from a 2021 health profile report, which was done by a reputable organization in Birmingham. So they looked at the Bangladeshi community. Type 2 diabetes is the most prevalent in Bangladeshis. Type 2 diabetes.
And why do you think that is?
So there's two things. One is our eating habit. Another one that a lot of people do not actually think about is this is a spillover from the colonial period. You might say, what's the relationship between the colonial period and us having a diabetes? So they actually did, there's an Indian researcher, reputable again, they actually did research and they found out that when the British were starving the people in Bengal, as a result, when people started finding food again, their bodies were storing food because it went through a situation where it had no food. So it's funny how the body works. So medical doctors will be able to actually give us more insight into that. So from the colonial period, our forefathers have had that in their genes and they're now passing it on. So it will take a few generations. So certain times you could be the most healthy person, but you will, because of your genes, you might still get it. If you're in the Bangladeshi, possibly the West Bengal community and the broader Indian community, but I think it's more concentrated in Calcutta, that sort of area, and in Bangladesh. Unfortunately, this is where the British actually did most of the damage in India. So those are the two things. So the eating habits, number one, and the other one is genetics, and a lot of it comes from the colonial period because of the way they treated people, and then starvation, famine. And after that, when people started getting a bit of food, the body, the way it was reacting, was storing everything rather than using as it's supposed to, because it's gone through a period. Or even the children who are born to the people who experienced famine. Remember, you're passing these genes on. A lot of the times we don't actually realize. So, the importance of making sure. And why do we have stunted growth? Talking about health, Rahul Bhai. In the Bangladeshi community, in Bangladesh, why is it we have a lot of stunted growth? because their forefathers 2 generations ago were starved by the British. So their genes, they could not, and also the stunted growth is to do with not being able to provide actual nutrients at the required time. So when they're 6 years old, 10 years old, as the body is developing, they're not getting those nutrients. Why is that? A country that was so rich became so poor. So a lot of these things are spillover from what 100 years ago happened.
It does
to
make
what's
sense
happening
because
now.
I think I remember you mentioning like few episodes back, like apparently Bengalis were very like tall,
They,
people
they
very
were they were they
very
were
big and
according
very
to history. Yeah.
muscular,
So
you know.
yeah, absolutely. So they were very what you would call they were people who were quite broad-shouldered, as in quite strong people. They may not have been the tallest, but they were actually quite. They were warrior people. If you look at what the Romans said, if you look at what the Greeks said, if you look at what happened with Alexander the not so great, I call him, you would see that the description, and also Ibn Battuta, when he went to visit Shah Jahan rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, Shah Jahan rahmatullahi alayhi, he was a tall man, quite fair, quite tall, and he had strong foreigners next to him. Now, this was in Sylhet. So our forefathers were people who, Ibn Battuta being a Moroccan, he wasn't exactly tiny. If he saw these people as foreign strong people, they must have been of quite a size. And the reason why our forefathers would have always been quite strong, I don't know how tall they were, but they would have been people with broad shoulders, and they were people who were working hard as well in the military training and all of that. It's easy to see why they were strong, and they were called strong foreigners. And Alexander the Great was scared to fight the Gangaridai kingdom, which were Bangladeshis, our forefathers. But now, if you look at the average Bangladeshi, you can't make that relation as to how the forefathers were really strong and how we suffered. The only thing that has happened is the British came, they did their policy of starvation, famine. Yeah, these were actual policies to decimate Bengal, because they wanted to really decimate the people. They wanted to decimate the how can I say, the resistance that people had. Most of the revolutionaries were from Bengal. Most of the revolutionaries. So they knew that politically these people would give them problems. So then they strategically, intentionally made policies where they got them to grow tobacco. And after you grow tobacco, you can't grow rice the next 6-7 months. It takes years. So if you have one shortage of food, you've got famine. And they did that deliberately. So again, so I don't want to go too far. So again, the type 2 diabetes is related to the colonial era, and also a lot of us, our diets don't help the situation. Also, higher risk of maternal mortality, and also babies being premature, the weight not being up to the required standard. Again, all of that is back to, some of it is to do with our health, a lot of it is to do with genetics. And again, that goes back to the colonial period of how things changed. You see, stunted growth comes from lack of nutrients. Why? A land that is so prosperous now doesn't have enough to feed its people. So in a lot of these things, these are damages that have happened from 70, 80 years ago that we're still suffering now. So there's a moral question here as well related to health. When we do not treat people the way they ought to be treated, it has a ripple effect for the next 50, 60, 70 years. So I think that's something we need to be mindful of. And also the low income does have an impact on what kind of foods you can feed your children. So if you don't have enough money, you will go for foods which are cheaper, and the cheaper ones are not necessarily the best food out there. So low income does have an impact on health as well.
Like in our community, yes, officially, obviously, we have a lot of people who
Low income,
are on low income. But if you go to an average house, Bengali house, people, when it comes to like eating, especially Bengali, we love our food. We love spending hours cooking. And on an average, in an average household, if you go to anyone's house, you'll find at least there's 4 or 5 dishes on a given day. Yeah. So when it comes to food, I don't think Bengalis actually do budget. That's one area
but
we don't budget.
True, that's fine. Even though they don't budget, if you look at the types of food that they get. So I will tell you, when I go to my local shops, Priya Bazaar and others, I see a lot of our people buying chicken nuggets, all of the things from the fridge. These are processed foods.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. So I was gonna mention, like, even the young generation, you'd think like they they're more like alert, they're more educated, they'd be, they'd understand about like a good diet. But the young generation are actually worse than the previous generation.
Yeah.
They're actually
According,
eating
yeah.
far more worse foods like fast food and processed foods.
So according to that, higher obesity of children between 6 to 10 years old in the Bangladeshi community.
Oh,
Obesity.
right.
Again, because of the types of food that they have.
Yeah.
So the low income, what I meant by that is, yes, you might have a lot of food, even if you think about it. Even the Asian food that we have, there the problem is you have excess oil. And again, what types of oil are we using? Are we using olive oil? Olive oil is very expensive. So, and again, because
most people
we cook,
use vegetable and sunflower oil, don't
there
they?
you go. So again, so a lot of, because we cook at high, if you were to call it, we fry things, so we need excess heat. But if we were to have food which didn't require as much frying, we could use olive oil, which is a lot better for our health. But again, we don't do that. We eat a lot of, for example, snacks for children. A lot of the time it will be, oh, they're hungry, just give them, a bit of chicken and chips and whatever you've got in the fridge, all processed again. And I was surprised to find out that amongst the Bangladeshis, between 6 to 10-year-olds, there's a high obesity, which is higher than the average our white counterpart. So the white children between 6 to 10-year-olds are not as obese as the Bangladeshi children. And that was a surprise to me. I didn't think, And so this is actually
we need to
well.
wrap up. We've only got a minute.
Okay.
So thanks for your contribution today. Basically,
fine.
the message is today is to eat healthy, and I think we need to educate ourselves. The parents need to take part. The schools need to, make an effort.
Absolutely.
The government needs to sort of send the message across. Yeah, like in Japan, the schools have to have like healthy food. Basically, they cannot have junk food. In the UK, we see like, fish and chips served, chicken and chips being served at schools, junk food, fried food being served. So we have to like look at other countries, how they're doing it. And I think we can afford to, like, so it's not as if we can't afford, we
Have the
can
money.
actually afford to actually change all these things. Obviously, it's a multi-agency effort. There has to be a certain collective effort from the government, from the local council, from the parents. We have to educate our future generations. So, especially in the Asian communities, like especially the Bangladeshi and the Pakistani community, we need to cut down on meat. Cut down, especially the oil, like Zakir Bhai mentioned earlier on. We need to use healthier options like olive oil. I know it's expensive, but you don't have to actually use a big amount of it. You can use small amounts of oil in your cooking, and that's the actually key to healthy eating. A lot of even in Italy they use a lot of oil, but they use